Hello everybody in YouTube land, and welcome to the fourth bracket battle, where I put two treacheries from a cycle head to head to determine which treachery I want to draw the least, and then crown the treachery that I think is the scariest from that cycle. You might notice I have a new microphone on. That's because the microphone I usually use broke. So I have this new one here. I don't like the microphone. I don't like how it sounds, but I mean, I still got to record the content for you. It doesn't stop. The buck doesn't stop here. So we have a new microphone coming in, so hopefully we won't have to deal with this one much longer. But thank you for hanging out, and I hope you enjoy this video regardless. So if this is your first bracket battle, the concept is actually relatively simple. I have two cards here from the Forgotten Age. So spoilers for the whole Forgotten Age campaign. We're going to be looking at all the treacheries. I'm going to look at the two cards, and I'm going to determine which one is the scariest in a double elimination format. So if you lose the first round, you have a chance to redeem yourself. And that is, a chance for you in matches like this, where it's actually two relatively strong cards that I think are actually quite scary. So the idea is that if I could draw either of these two cards, which one would I choose to draw? And the one I would choose to draw does not advance into the next round. So the scarier one gets to go forward, and we're going to figure out what the scariest card is here. A few things to come through this is the fact that I'm going to assume not relatively the worst for these. Like, I'm going to kind of assume the midpoint for it, where you're probably going to fail the test, but maybe if it's a scale test, you don't fail by it all the time, but it is going to take into consideration for how deep it can go. It's really, this is all just my feelings, and no one can argue with my feelings, and if you do, you're wrong. That's the power of me making this video. This is based on my thoughts and my feelings. Already with this microphone, by the way, I feel like a new Justin. So I'm not going to be my normal self. I don't feel like I can talk like my normal self. I don't feel like I can act like my normal self. This is going to be a Justin that you've never experienced before. So I feel a bit more like Steve Jobs giving a presentation for the new iPhone than I do for my normal Justin self. So with that in mind, why don't we dive in? Here's the full bracket, by the way. We got a lot of cards to talk about today. My first time, for the first time a card appears, I'll read what the card does. After that, however, I am not going to read what the cards say, but I will say the card's title and maybe give a summary of what the card does, just in case you do not remember what it is. However, the first time the card appears, I will read what the card does. So, our first battle today is a Tear in Time. This is a revelation. It's a hex, by the way. Test Brain 3. For each point you fail by, you must either lose one action or take one horror. So a Rotting Remains variant. Pretty standard stuff. We have Lost in Time. This is a hex with a revelation. Shuffle a non-story asset you control into your deck, moving all damage and horror from that asset to your investigator. If no asset is shuffled into your deck by this effect, choose and discard 3 cards from your hand. Okay. So, in Forgotten Age, while I was putting all this together, the frickin' encounter deck, it does not, there's a reason why Forgotten Age is considered to be the hardest campaign. And a big reason for that is obviously the supplies mechanic, the explore mechanic, all these things that come together to create a perfect storm of a tough blind play. But beyond that, even when you have all of that in your pocket, you know what to expect. The encounter deck is still going to be throwing so many frickin' haymakers at you that it's actually kind of insane. Normally when I would build, at least get all the cards together and label them, get all their arts, sort them, it was very much, I'm like, oh, this card is kind of soft. This is the one that I'm happy to draw. There's not many of those in Forgotten Age. So if a card here is eliminated, it's not because the card is easy, it's just that the other one is a little bit harder. This is a very interesting matchup because Lost in Time, the first one is generally okay. The first Lost in Time is annoying, but it's generally something that you can play around. If you're not playing around it, that is kind of on you. The Pokeball icon is a very tough encounter set. I think both these cards are pretty tough. Losing one asset to a Lost in Time, you should be expecting that. If Pokeball is in the deck, you kind of want to do this. However, the second Lost in Time hits so freaking hard. It does not mess around. I like the choice to have it also move the damage and horror from that asset onto your investigator, so you can't just heal your soak. Your soak will damage you, so it makes it some very hard choices. If you only have soak in play, this card is absolutely crippling. A Tear in Time Also a pretty scary encounter card. Rotting Remains is always a scary thing. However, this card I do actually think is easier because you can choose to lose an action if you really don't want to die to horror. And if you only fail by like 1 or 2, it's easy to split it between like 2 horror, like 1 horror, 1 action, or like 2 horror. Or if you really need to, you don't have anything you're doing this turn, 2 actions. So like, I think just generally, I think Lost in Time is easier. Like if I drew both of these and like I was set up, I would want to draw Lost in Time. But I can't shake all the memories that Lost in Time brought me when it comes to that second Lost in Time. So I think for this one, I am going to give the win to Lost in Time. Just because I think that... Sorry, 1 second. I have to just make this matchup is here. Oh, no, we can't do it like that. We go like this. Perfect. Do I need to do a score? I'm figuring out this bracket maker thing. It's different each time. Winner is Lost in Time. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, we'll see Terran Time into the losers bracket, but right now, Lost in Time is our first winner. And with that, let's get moving on to our second match, which is going to be these 2 cards. Lost in Time at the wrong moment will cost you a scenario. I think that's kind of a skill issue. I don't think it's as bad as some of the other effects that can cause you to lose a scenario. I think it's more just if you need to play around it. And if you're good, you can play around it, I think. All right, we got Creeping Darkness and No Turning Back. So Creeping Darkness is a hazard. Attach next to Nexus in the Kai, place 1 Doom on Creeping Darkness. Formless Spawn gets plus player health. As a double action, test Brain 3 or check your supplies. If you succeed or you have the torches, discard Creeping Shadows. Like turn 1 Duke, once again, like I'm gonna go back to that point. A turn 1 Duke and you didn't play anything else and you got beat by Lost in Time, that's on you. I'm sorry. I don't think that's a good example. Because if you haven't played an asset on turn 1, like if you haven't played something, I think that's on you. I think like it's more, once again, it's the second and third Lost in Time that I think get really scary. Alright, so, place 1 Doom on Creeping Darkness, it gets plus player health, double action, test 3 or check your supplies. If you succeed or if you have torches, discard Creeping Shadows. We have no turning back, this is a hazard. Revelation, attach no turning back to your location or connecting location, limit 1 per location. Investigators cannot enter or leave attached location. Action, fist 3, or check your supplies. If you succeed or if you have a pickaxe, discard no turning back. Any investigator or connecting location may activate this ability. It does say Creeping Shadows. It does, doesn't it? That's crazy. Creeping Darkness. They ain't using the title, the full name feature on their card editor. That's funny. I think I actually have noticed that too in a previous video. I feel so restricted with this headset. I don't feel like me right now, and it feels like my vibe is off. So if my vibe is off and you're watching this, I apologize, but I don't feel like me right now. Okay. These 2 cards, I think generally I'm okay to draw. No, I'm sure I sound fine, but I don't feel like myself. I don't feel like I don't feel like presenter Justin, if that makes sense. I don't feel like me. So, like, Creeping Darkness is annoying, but most of the time you can just, like, get rid of Creeping Darkness or, like, ignore it. Like, the reality is that a lot of the time, Creeping Darkness, we kind of just end up ignoring, because in the final scenario, you can kind of just win if you just, like, do better and go quick enough, right? that's like kind of where we feel and we fall in Creeping Darkness. In terms of like treacheries in the final scenario, I think I would rather draw Creeping Darkness over most of them, so like that makes that a lot easier. As for No Turning Back, I do think the card is, as Arkham Librarian in chat says, is pretty tough on the blind play, but then after that I think it becomes relatively manageable. However, like, it at the wrong time can be really rough if no one has the pickaxe or if you're separated from your goon. And, like, generally the times where No Turning Backs, the maps can be pretty small. Most of my memories with No Turning Back comes in Depths of Yoth, which I think makes sense because I think that's the set that it's from, right? It's specifically from that scenario. Yeah, like the thing is, most of the time with this Creeping Darkness and or Creeping Shadows, it just like I don't really care about it. It's I don't have any memories of this card actually really being that big of a problem. The random acolyte that spawns back on an empty location is usually a bigger issue than Creeping Darkness. So I'm not really like feel like either of these are like really cooking too much. So I'm going to be putting this one, I think I'm going to give it to No Turning Back, but I don't think that relatively either of these ones are moving the needle for me too much as like a very scary encounter card. Okay. Alrighty, on to the next match here, which this art I always hate when I draw it. So that probably means I don't like the card. Okay. Alright, Timeline Destabilization. So this one's from Boundary Beyond. It's a Hexed Revelation, Test Brain 1. This test gets +1 difficulty for each ancient location in play. If you fail, take 1 damage and 1 horror, and shuffle Timeline Destabilization into the exploration deck. Yeah, this card fucking sucks. That card's a nightmare. That card, I don't think it's the worst card in the set. Actually, it's really funny. These two cards are actually quite similar, this matchup that was just randomly shuffled for the seeds. So Pitfall is a trap, it's a peril. You must either choose one, test Brain 3 to attempt to jump the gap. For each point you fail by, take 1 damage, so it's a Grasping Hands. Or, alternatively, you can shuffle Pitfall into the exploration deck. You cannot choose this option if Pitfall was drawn from the exploration deck. This one's pretty easy. I'm not even gonna I'm not gonna bury the lead. I'm just gonna say that Timeline Destabilization here is the worst card for me, just because it scales. It doesn't deal as much damage. Like Pitfall does have a higher ceiling for damage, but at a certain point, with Pitfall, you're kind of just done with the exploration deck. And there's a lot of times where Pitfall actually is a card that doesn't really do anything, right? Like, you just draw it and you're like, we're done exploring. I'm going to throw this into the exploration deck. And then that becomes like a lot easier to manage. And Timeline Destabilization usually is a Brain 3 test. Later on, it also has the same sort of thing where it can be easier to manage, like it shuffling into the exploration deck isn't too bad. However, when that does happen, you are still taking a damage and a horror, as opposed to Pitfall, where there's actually no downside into shuffling into the deck. So while the downside of Timeline Destabilization is less bad later on in the scenario, like Pitfall is, it still has that damage and horror on top of it. Of course, if you're a Mystic, this is a very easy test to pass. Like a Brain 3 is pretty doable, but the autofail still exists. Likewise, the Elder Sign still exists, so I'm not going to worry too much about stats for these kinds of things. But Timeline Destabilization is a card I never want to see, and Pitfall I'm usually pretty okay with most of the time to see. So we're going to give this one to our good friend, Timeline Destabilization. Okay. That goes away. And we're going to go on to our next match, and we are absolutely killing it. I mean, I say that as a man who is on his 4th match and 14 minutes into the video, so do with that what you will. Okay. I know. So, do you want to know the real reason why I feel like I don't feel like myself? I'm Italian, right? So, if you don't know that, I'm Italian. And Italians love to talk with their hands and their bodies. It's kind of just like in the thing that makes us us. And I feel like I can't speak as loud as I normally do or be as expressive. See, I'm starting to feel a bit more like me. But I want to be louder and more boisterous, and I feel like I can't do that with this microphone because it's so close to me. Roar if you love bear paws. We love bear paws. All right. Next match here is Entombed. This is a trap. It's a revelation. Put Entombed into your threat area. You cannot disengage from enemies or move. As an action, you can test foot 4 to escape the tomb, or fist 4 to break out. If you succeed, discard Entombed. If you fail, reduce the difficulty of this test by 1 until the end of the round. Very fun card. I have a lot of good memories with Entombed, but let's see how scary it is. How scary it is. We also have Nobody's Home. This is a mystery. Ooh, that's a fun trait for a treachery. Revelation. Attach your location. If there are no clues on your location, Nobody's Home gains Surge. You must spend 1 additional action to investigate attached location. If there are no clues on attached location, discard Nobody's Home. So, here's the thing, okay? I don't think Entombed is that scary, but I also actually don't really recall Nobody's Home ever being too much of an issue. There's so many ways to just get additional clues or like get clues for free that a lot of the time most of my memory with Nobody's Home isn't a problem. There's also a lot of time with Nobody's Home when you draw it and it's on a location that had like, you're just like, okay, I'll move to another location. And you just like ignore it, right? You just like, I'm not worried about this shit. This isn't gonna like make me worry too much about that. And also it's like Entombed and Nobody's Home are a lot different. Where Nobody's Home is from Threads of Fate, which is a scenario that actually has a scaling win condition, right? Where you can... Nobody's Home's not going to cause you to lose the scenario. It's going to make you just win less, right? Where on the flip side, Entombed comes in a scenario that you can actually lose. So, like, it's already, it has that sort of thing on it. It doesn't cause you any damage or horror. It doesn't, like, have any risk of trauma. It just makes it so that you don't have to, like... You just have to, like, either cheat clues, ignore the location, or just get 1 less objective. Like, you only get 2 instead of 3 objectives. Like, that's life, right? Like, that's just how it goes. I'm sorry. So, like, that's why I'm not too scared of Nobody's Home. But, like, I also can't really recall a time where Entombed didn't do more than just make you lose tempo. And, like, that's scary. Losing tempo is scary. I don't know. I think these two are actually pretty soft. I have a lot of memories with Entombed in our draft run where Preston kept getting stuck in a hole and we had to work together to get Preston out of the hole. Those were good times. I mean, I'm looking at the matchup that this one's going into next, and I can tell you that whoever wins this one is going to lose the next one 100%. Like, we're not even joking about it. Like, it's going to lose the next matchup for sure. I think I am going to give this to... I think I'm going to give it to Entombed. Just because, like, if you're on your own and you're trapped and you, like, have low foot and low fist, it's going to take a lot of actions to get out of here. I'm going to go with Entombed for this one, but I think that this one's actually, like, pretty close, and if you asked me on a different day, it'll probably be a different thing. But I think of these two, I would rather draw Nobody's Home than Entombed, if I was playing some sort of weird chaos scenario where you just shuffle everything together. But I think, like, both of these cards are actually pretty fine. Alright, let's keep this show going, because we got some stuff we need to do, and that stuff is this next matchup, which Yeah, okay, that's a card. And that's a card. Okay. Let's see what we got. We got Final Mistake. So this is a Revelation test foot 2. This test gets +1 difficulty for each doom on your location. If you fail, take 2 damage. Okay, so this is actually a pretty standard encounter card, right? Where there's like 2 types of cards that you'll see quite frequently in this game in terms of testing your brain or your foot. One of them is the Rotting Remains variant, where the damage you take, the horror you take, scales with the amount you fail by. And then there's the alternative, which usually always deal 2 damage or 2 horror, but the test difficulty scales. So this is the example of that one. Generally, I think cards that deal you damage are the scariest things in the game. And they are usually the cards that you're like, if I draw a card that deals me damage, I die. So that's where those things are always going to have a little bit more than that for me. We also have Racked by Time. So this is from Shattered Aeons. It's a Hex. Test Brain 3. Each investigator at a shadow location must also perform this skill test. Each investigator who fails takes 2 damage. Each asset damaged by this effect that is not defeated is shuffled to its owner's deck. Racked by Time is going to win. And this one, it's going to win just for the sole point of... here, let me get some more light on me. Just for the sole point that it can hit multiple people, right? That's automatically the card that you want to see less of, because sure, Final Mistake's damage doesn't scale, but in a bad situation, Racked by Time could potentially deal multiple damage to each investigator. Like, that's pretty spooky. So we're going to give this one to Racked by Time, just for the nature of that. I think that, like, generally these cards are also actually pretty similar. I will say, though, that brain tests that deal damage are a lot scarier than brain tests that deal horror, specifically for the Mystic class. It's kind of funny how that works, mostly because they have more horror than damage. It's not that crazy. So yeah, we're going to give this one to Racked by Time, mostly because of that. But I like that the matchups have actually, the random shuffle has been pretty good for this. It's like a bracket maker just knows or something. There's a ghost in the computer that's doing stuff, pulling strings on the back end. Okay, on to our next match here. Match number 6. Okay. We got low on supplies. This is a blunder. It's a peril. Revelation, you must decide. Each investigator loses 2 resources. Each investigator takes 1 damage. Each investigator chooses and discards an asset they control. Or Shadowed, which... I always see the Barkham horror art, and if you don't see that art, you're either newer to Arkham or you're lying. I'm sorry. So, it's a scheme, Revelation. If there are no cultist enemies in play, take 1 horror and Shadowed gains Surge. Otherwise, find the cultist enemy nearest to you, place 1 doom that enemy, and test Brain X, where X is that enemy's fight value. If you fail, take 2 horror. So, Shadowed is probably the encounter card in this game that annoys me the most. Mostly because it does something that not many other encounter cards do, which is deal you damage or horror while surging, if there's no effect. There's cards that are designed to deal you damage and surge, like a card that's going to be coming later on here. However, this one is, if there are no cultist enemies, congratulations, you're playing really well, but here's 1 horror just for convenience. Just to, like, add on to this. I'm pretty sure this card comes from the set that also has Brotherhood Cultist, so, like, it's a pretty good 1-2 punch from this. Low on supplies, on the other hand, can be bad, right? Like, taking 2 resources from everybody multiple times can just, like, stop you from playing the game. However, with that said, there's a lot of leeway on low on supplies that, like, the decisions are so... There's so much that you can make in the decisions that I think most of the time that it's not a problem. Can you choose 2 resources if one player doesn't have any? So yes, as long as you change the game state, right? So like if like as Metroid Man is saying, and that's where this card actually becomes really easy to work with. So whenever something says you must decide, it's a legal choice as long as the game state changes in some way. So that's legal. For example, if everyone had the 2 resources to play, that would be a legal choice. However, if, for example, 3 players had 0 resources and 1 player had 1 resource for some reason, you can choose the each player loses 2 resources option, and it changes the game state. So the losing 1 resource from the 1 player is enough to satisfy the must decide condition for this card, because the game state does change, which makes low on supplies a lot softer because of that. It doesn't need to lose 2 from everybody. And it's one of those things that that's where low on supplies becomes a softer card just generally. So I'm going to give this one to Shoutout. I think it has the higher potential for like a 1-2 punch, and then also it also has the added bonus of having like the most annoying surge effect that you've ever seen in this game. Ooh, an interesting match coming up for this next one. I'm very curious to see what people think, because this one is very interesting to me. Because I don't think either of these cards generally, I think generally these 2 cards are actually pretty soft, but they have the potential to both be game ruining, which is kind of really cool. And I think that's why these designs are so interesting to talk about for encounter cards, because they're very soft until they aren't, and then they're very bad. So we have Deep Dark. This is a hazard. Put Deep Dark into play next to the agenda deck. No more than 1 clue may be discovered from each location by each investigator each round. At the end of the round, discard 1 copy of Deep Dark from play, max once per round. Versus Snake Scourge. This is a curse. Revelation. Put Snake Scourge into play in your threat area. If you are poisoned, Snake Scourge gains Surge. Treat each of your non-weakness item assets as if their text box were blank except for traits. Forced, at the end of the round, discard Snake Scourge. So, yeah, Deep Dark isn't annoying until you draw 2 in a row. And it's something that happens especially later on if you're going really deep in Depths of Yoth, where you have to draw so many encounter cards. Suddenly you're drawing Deep Darks every turn, and it just kills the potential clue pacing you can get. Snake Scourge, on the flip side of that, is if it hits your goon, good night. Right, it hits your goon at the wrong time, that's a nightmare. We saw this do a bunch of damage to Bryn very recently when it kept eating his Rod of Animalism, which killed a bunch of his dogs, which is really fun. But it is very dependent on who it hits and what your deck is doing. Deep Dark feels especially bad in 4-player. I agree it does. However, what I do like about the design for Deep Dark is that it can be mitigated by building your decks to not just hyper focus on one thing, which are cards designs that I personally prefer, because I feel like it's a bit too easy. It's a bit too easy for people to just go. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, right? But I was actually recently playing a Silas with this, and his ability to grab clues with Deep Dark when a Deep Dark's in play to help the Clover is very nice. I think of the 2 that I would rather draw, I mean, honestly, depending on the situation and who I am, I would rather draw either of them for different reasons. So it's the question of which one has worst case scenarios? And Snake Scourge actually caused us to lose a scenario this year when I was playing with Eric. So I'm going to give this one to, I'd rather draw, just in a vacuum with my experiences, I would rather draw Deep Dark than Snake Scourge. So I'm going to give this one to Snake Scourge. But it comes from the fact that I actually have a memory where it caused me as parallel skids to get some trauma. So we're going to go with that. All right. This is probably my least favorite card from the Forgotten Age. These are two banger encounter cards. They're bangers, okay, for our last match on the round 1 bracket. Ancestral Fear. This card has Peril and Surge. Revelation. You must decide. Choose one. Place 1 Doom on your location and discard Ancestral Fear instead of placing it in the victory display, or place Ancestral Fear in the victory display. Going up against Arrows from the Trees. Revelation. Take 1 damage and plus 1 additional damage for each ally ass you control. Each other investigator in an ancient location must also resolve that effect. Oh, Ancestral Fear. Important context, you can't outtime Ancestral Fear. You can outtime Ancestral Fear because it is also in Depths of Yoth. That is the only time that you're able to actually beat Ancestral Fear. Otherwise, Ancestral Fear's Doom lives forever, I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe not on Heart of the Elders. Maybe not on Heart of the Elders. Which I also think I said incorrectly. I think I said Depths of Yoth when I meant to say Heart of the Elders earlier with the no turning back. But so I think both these cards are tough encounter cards. Arrows from the Trees with the wrong investigator is so much damage. It's also like part of the reward for talking with Hishtaka to have these cards be blank, which is like a lifesaver because they can deal so much damage. However, Ancestral Fear is probably one of the encounter cards in the Forgotten Age that I want to draw the least. It's hilarious that they included Arrows from the Trees in the same expansion they released Leo in. Honestly, I support it. I think that the campaigns should counter the investigators in the campaign. Why the fuck not, right? Let's have some fun. Let's make people lose the game as opposed to just get a million experience and win the game. It's a lot more exciting if it actually directly counters the investigators in the pack. It's a little bit more interesting to me. I mean, I'm going to give this to Ancestral Fear. Ancestral Fear is the card that I hate drawing. I hate it. I just this card. I'm never happy to draw Ancestral Fear because most of the time you're drawing it and the Doom's there forever. If you're playing the Doom of Etsley or whatever the second scenario is called, this is just Doom that lives forever, and you can't get rid of it. But the Ancestral has campaign effects, like the Vengeance mode. And then it also surges on top of that. So, congratulations, you permanently Ancient Evils yourself while also drawing another encounter card on top of that. It's a painful encounter card. All right, we're on to round 2 on the top bracket. So we have Lost in the Wilds. We're going to start seeing some cards again that were in the first match, or that we've already talked about as we get into placement for this round 2. And we got Lost in Time. Okay. We got Lost in the Wilds. This is a blunder. Revelation. Test Brain 3. If you fail, take 1 horror for each point you fail by, and add Lost in the Wilds into your threat area. You cannot move or explore. At the end of your turn, discard Lost Wilds. Going up against Lost in Time, which is the one that shuffles an asset into your deck. Okay, this one's interesting, because I think both these cards are absolutely brutal encounter cards. I think Lost in the Wilds is probably, just that it's a Rotting Remains that also, stops you from moving or exploring. That's very tough because a lot of the time just canceling someone's ability to move can be the difference between winning a scenario and losing a scenario, which is kind of wild. I mean, we talked about Lost in Time. I think the first one's pretty manageable. The second one becomes a nightmare. If you're playing a very asset heavy deck, you don't really care about Lost in Time. I think I'm going to give this one to Lost in the Wilds. I think the card is actually just scarier. like stopping somebody from moving is really tough, right? Like, it hits from top to bottom, just like there's nothing about Lost in the Wilds that you can like turn into a good thing. Like maybe you don't need to move, but like it probably would be better if you could move. So like there's that, right? Yeah, and then like if you're like a rogue as well, like the brain's really bad, but I'm not gonna think about that too much. Yeah, no, and yeah, as you're saying, Metroid Man, it does happen where sometimes like a card seems to just be like surgically attached to you, and if you draw multiple Lost in the Wilds, like that's a nightmare. So I'm gonna give this one to Lost in the Wilds. Congratulations, you're gonna move on to the next round. Okay, well, that's a tough card. Against a super soft card. Okay, so I think we can all know. I'm going to show you guys these cards, and I'm sure you're going to immediately know who's going to win. So as I show them, I'm just going to drink some water, and you guys can take some time if you're watching the video, and then I'll read the cards out, and you know which one of these two is going to win. Okay. We got The Secret Must Be Kept. This is a peril. Test Brain 3. If you fail, take 1 damage and 1 horror. For each act deck the investigators have completed, this skill test gets +1 difficulties and deals +1 damage and +1 horror if it is failed. That's pretty tough, okay? This is probably the encounter card that everyone has to have in the back of their mind as they are playing through Threads of Fate. It's also the reason why you... why you need to not you don't complete agendas like or acts, and you wait until the last minute to try to complete as many as you can in like a series of turns, so The Secret Must Be Kept becomes even easier. Then we have Words of Power, which is a hex. Put Words of Power into play in your threat area. If there are one or more enemies in your location with Doom on them, you cannot damage those enemies or discover clues of your location. Double action, discard Words of Power. Words of Power, people are saying Words of Power in chat. That sounds like a you problem. This is Secret Must Be Kept. Honestly, I'm sorry, a double action card is never going to be scary for me in this game. I'll always take a double action card because someone can get rid of it. If it's a problem, like you can sequence out a turn where you can get rid of a Words of Power. Double action cards do not, like most of the time, it has to have like an effect that like actually causes me to like die instantly for me to actually worry about a double action power. Most of the time they're pretty soft. So Words of Power is actually probably the treachery that I would like to draw the most in this campaign, probably. Because you just get rid of it. It's 2 actions. Just spend it, get rid of it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. Alright, we're seeing No Turning Back is back. So we got Voice of the Jungle. This is a power. Put Voice of the Jungle into play in your threat area. At the end of your turn, if you did not successfully explore this turn, take 1 horror. As an action, test Brain 3. If you succeed, discard Voice of the Jungle. And then No Turning Back is the one that goes on a location you cannot enter or leave it, and you can test Fist to get rid of it or use the pickaxe. Mandy and Harvey do the same breeding pose, I just noticed. That's funny. Sign of intelligence. That's good. Okay, so No Turning Back just kind of squeezed through. I think Voice of the Jungle is the scarier card of the two. Because Voice of the Jungle will stick around. Most of the time, like a lot of the time you're able to just like kind of like have it just hover around, and then you draw the second one. I think there are 2. There's got to be 2 in the set. And it's just like, oh no, I made a mistake. It's really fun though. I do like I do like that it can like actually you can use it as a positive to find a reason and a priority to explore, but I think ultimately the no turning back is not too scary of a card, so we're going to give this one to Voice of the Jungle. I have a lot of memories of Bryn having Voice of the Jungle, and he's like, I'm just gonna like try to win the game before we lose the game, but it like adds an extra stress onto it, which is a little bit both fun. I think it's a fun encounter card, but I think it is not the scariest, but I definitely think it's scarier than No Turning Back. Okay. This is an interesting match. We have Serpent's Call. It's a power. Revelation, you must either choose one, put a set-aside poison weakness into play in your threat area, or draw the top 2 cards of the encounter deck. Versus Overgrowth. Attach to location, limit 1 per location. You cannot explore at attached location as an action. Test Fist 4 to hack through the route, or Book 4 to find another route. If you succeed, discard Overgrowth. So this is a little bit of this is going to sound really strange, okay? But bear with me for a second. But like when I look at these 2 cards, I'd rather draw Overgrowth, which is crazy, right? Like that's crazy. But like it's just because I have. I would rather draw Serpent's Call. I would rather draw Serpent's Call, because like I actually have more times where Overgrowth has caused more issues than Serpent's Call, because Overgrowth is in the Untamed. It's in the first scenario, right? Is that the only? No, it's in the Rainforest set. And it's just, it becomes more of a problem than what Serpent's Call is. Which is wild, right? Because Serpent's Call could be anything. It also could be an enemy that your goon can solve. Like, if you're the goon, you get this. You can also solve the Overgrowth as the goon, but, like, if there's enemies, I don't know why, but my gut is telling me to choose Overgrowth as the scarier card here, which is crazy. Because I actually don't think Serpent's Call is that scary of a card. There's only one of it in the deck. There's only one of it. So it's one of those things where it shows up, and then you're just like, I'll just draw 2 encounter cards. And then you draw them, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't that bad. But losing to Overgrowth is much more of a skill issue. I agree. No, I do agree. I don't think Overgrowth... the thing is, I don't think either of these cards are scary. Like, are just generally scary. But, like, of these 2, Overgrowth has caused more issues than Serpent's Call. Because I actually, like, I can think of moments where Overgrowth, especially in Untamed Wilds, has been an issue. Right? And it's like, okay, this has pushed us back, and ultimately, like, was the reason why we weren't able to snatch up the victory and get, like, a good footing going into Doom of Etzli. Serpent's Call, I just see Travis, like, I'll draw 2 cards, he resolves them, and he's like, that's fine. It's one of those things where, like, I'm trying to figure out why Overgrowth is the one that I want to choose to advance here. Because what's Serpent's Call? I mean, I'm also a man who loves overzealous, so like maybe I can't be trusted. All right, chat. I need you guys. I need to do an Ask the Audience here. What would you choose here, chat? Which one of these 2 would you rather draw? Either it's all explored or you go around. Yeah, that is true. It also like can also just like do nothing, right? Mushrooms plus an extra snake when you're already low on sanity. It's true. I mean, yeah, the mushrooms thing, but I mean, the mushrooms thing is also like not really too much of a thing. Serpent's Call is worse than long COVID. Man, you need to fucking chill, brother. you are a little bit too much. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Yeah, if you have other states playing, just overgrowth ain't bad. I don't know, man. I just think either of these are scary. I think that neither of these cards are scary. I'll go with the chat thing, though. We're going to give it to Serpents, but I don't think either of these cards are spooky to me. I don't think either of them really matter. So we'll go with Serpent's Call. I agree, though. I agree with you, chat, but I don't think that neither of these cards are really moving the needle for me. Okay, up next... Like, I'll always ward Serpents. Why would you ward Serpents? I would never ward Serpents. I would draw the cards and then ward the cards that I could draw. Because if you ward Serpents... Okay, so here's the thing. I don't think you ever ward Serpents. If you ward Serpents, you've canceled Serpents, but you haven't canceled the other two cards. If you think that the other two cards can be worse than Serpents, you can take them out. You can take one of those out of the encounter deck and, like, just resolve a soft one. I don't think I would ever ward Serpents. I don't think I ever would. Maybe I would, but I don't think I would, because, like, I don't care. Like, those other two cards could be anything, and then I could save my ward for something that's actually potentially scary in the future. That's the thing, right? Like, if you draw, like, an enemy that you can just kill, no problem. If you draw, like, an encounter card that you don't care, like, just, like, save it, right? Like, I would... It's like the, it could be anything, so... Why would I stop the thing that could be anything versus the thing that actually, like, scares me, right? Because, like, it could be anything. So it could be scary or it could be soft. And I don't want to cancel something that could be soft, especially if my two opponents draw, like, something simple. I don't know. Feel like I'm getting one over the game? I think that, yeah, that's very true. It does feel nice. It does, yeah, it does feel like a good middle finger to the game to ward it. I can respect that thought. All right, we got Captive Mind. This is a test brain 0. Regardless of whether this skill test succeeds or fails, choose and discard all but X cards from your hand, where X is your modified skill value for this test. That's from the City of Archives. And then we got Timeline Destabilization. We've seen this one before. This is the one that is a brain test that scales with the number of ancient locations. If you fail, take a damage in horror, then shuffle Timeline Destabilization into the exploration deck. So, Captive Mind is a scary card for only 10% of the City of Archives. Because in the first part of it, you actually don't care about your hand. In the last part of it, when you're trying to get to 10 cards, a Captive Mind can be absolutely crushing. Timeline Destabilization is scary, but it only shows up in Boundary Beyond, so it doesn't actually, like, impact too much, because losing Boundary Beyond, trust me, I've been there, doesn't actually change the game too much. So it's not too much of an issue. I think ultimately these cards have their ups and their downs for when they're scary. I love the design of Captive Mind. That's a really good encounter card. Like, that encounter card is, like, working hard to... the card is working hard to, like, be a really unique encounter card and, like, working very well in the scenario. But, I mean, like, the secret is that when you draw it, you just commit, like, the most brain icons you have in your hand and hope. Again, it's just one of those things that, like, later on in the scenario, it becomes really bad. I think I'm going to give this one to Captive Mind, just because, like, losing your hand sucks. If you draw an autofail on this card, it's, like, even early on, it really sucks. I'm going to give this one to that. I think to Timeline, like, I think the thing about, like, Well, I'm kind of like going into the next level for this one, where I'm looking at what happens if you lose each of the scenarios that this card is in, right? Going into that meta level, because I think we have to dig a little bit deeper when the time calls for it. And with timeline destabilization, if you lose Boundary Beyond, it just means you have to play Heart of the Elders a few times. If you lose City of Archives, you're a Yithian, and like you practically have lost the campaign. So I'm going to give that one, but again, I think that like these are kind of in the mid for where they're scarier, but I think like losing your hand just generally is going to put you back more than taking a damage in a horror and losing an action in the future. But you also could keep losing actions over and over by putting it in the Explore deck. So maybe Timeline Destabilization is scarier, but like Timeline Destabilization is like the inverse of Captive Mind, where Captive Mind starts soft. Captive Mind starts soft because you just commit cards. Like the secret in City of Archives is you don't care about your hand until the end of the scenario, right? And then, however, so like at the earlier the scenario, Captive Mind does nothing. Later on, it does something huge. Timeline Destabilization does something earlier, but then later on becomes a lot easier to deal with. So I think just because of that, if we look at the cards where they're at their worst point for what the impact they can have on you, I think while Captive Mind is a softer effect, it has a higher damage output for what it can do in the long-term levels of the campaign. But again, I think that ask me on a different day and those ones will switch. Okay, next up here we got Creeping Poison. This is a Surge. Revelation. Each investigator who is poisoned takes 1 damage versus Yithian Presence. Put Yithian Presence into play in your threat area. If there is a Yithian enemy or location, you cannot investigate. The location will trigger action abilities on counter cards. As an action, choose and discard 2 cards from your hand, discard Yithian Presence. I think this one should be pretty obvious of which one is going to be worse. So we're going to give this to Creeping Poison, which is the card that does nothing until it does everything. You don't realize, I'm pretty sure you don't realize that like there's what this card can do to you until you're poisoned, and then you're like, please stop. Like if you're poisoned in 4 players, you're gonna see so many Creeping Poisons in a scenario. It's kind of crazy. I'm pretty sure there is only 2 of them, but it feels like there's 3 of them. I was going to say there's 3, but there's actually only 6 in the set, and I'm pretty sure 4 of that set is the poisoned permanent. So, like, that's kind of like where this comes in. Yithian Presence doesn't matter. It's like a non-card. It's good for the scenario and it's flavorful, but like... it's one of those things, but like just don't get poisoned. It's true. Just don't get poisoned. That's a good way of like doing it, and it should be your goal in every Forgotten Age run. Don't get poisoned, or get poisoned but have medicine for your poison, right? So it's one of those things that if you don't, it's great, but if you do, suddenly this is the card that you hate the most in the entire encounter set, because it will kill you and it will have a good time killing you. So we're going to give this one to Creeping Poisoned. How's Russ? Russ is great. This card is why you don't get poisoned. This card, and then also the enemy that you can't commit skill cards to. Surprisingly relevant. Even if you're not a skill-based investigator, suddenly you're just like, oh, why do I want to commit cards so much? Okay. We have Snakebite. This is a hazard poison. Test foot 3. If you fail, you must either choose one. Deal 5 damage to an ally asset you control. Take 1 direct damage. If you're not poisoned, put a set-aside poison weakness into play in your threat area. Versus Entombed, which we've talked about earlier. You cannot disengage and move. I did say earlier that whoever won the Entombed versus Nobody's home battle was going to lose to Snakebite, and I was not lying. Snakebite is like the card in Forgotten Age that you kind of have to like think about all the time when the scenario is happening, because you kind of want to have someone that you can throw in front of the bus to get bit by a snake if it needs to, because as we just learned, getting poisoned sucks. It's like, it's what you do everything in your power to avoid, and when it happens, you're like, well, that is a little bit poopy, and now I hope I brought medicine, otherwise it's going to be there. And I do, as you were saying, Beard. The poison, actually, they do a good job of like covering it in a variety of ways for how it can get to you. The foot test on snakebite, the attacks from the snake, and also the agenda flip, which is, I think, really cool. It's scary as hell, but really cool. I'm going to drink up some water, so bear with me. Yeah, congratulations, Snakebite. You are definitely our winner today. Honestly, you might go far. Because you're one of the few treacheries that actually can, like, carry over. Like, it's a treachery in Scenario 1 that you might still be feeling all the way to Scenario 8, which is crazy. Crazy. Like, crazy good design. I love it. But it is actually a surprisingly relevant card. All right. You asked me 1 year ago, and my thoughts on Curse of Yig would be completely different. So Curse of Yig, put into play in your threat area. You get -1 fist, -1 health, and gain the Serpent trait. As an action, Test Brain 2, this test gets +1 difficulty for each vengeance points in the victory display. If you succeed, discard Curse of Yig. Versus Window to Another Time. Peril. You must either choose and shuffle an ancient location back to the exploration deck. The present day location stays underneath it, takes its place. Or place 1 doom on the current agenda. This effect can cause the agenda to advance. So, as I was saying, that this card it changed my perspective over the last year when over 2 campaigns, Curse of the Yig got 4 kills. Which is impressive. Like, it got 4 kills. That's so good for, like, 1 encounter card. Window to Another Time is scary in Boundary Beyond, right? Like, it's not a fun encounter card. There's a lot of things. However, it does become, like, a lot easier later on in the scenario. So we're going to go with Curse of Yig. Like I said, if you asked me, like, a year ago, I think I probably would have not chosen Curse of Yig. So, like, I had no respect for it. And now I got mad respect for Curse of Yig. This card is a killer. You can play around Curse of Yig. You can play around Curse of Yig. You can. But what does Window of Another Time do? Like, what does Window of Another Time do, actually, right? It just means, like, the only punishment, like, really, is that you have to play 1 more Heart of the Elders, potentially, right? Like, so Boundary Beyond has become a lot less scary to me because of that. I still think the scenario is a challenging scenario, and you'll probably walk away with some form of trauma, right? But, like, really, what does Boundary Beyond do to you? Apart from just, like, make you have to play Heart of the Elders 1 more time. And, like, yeah, I don't like playing Heart of the Elders. But, like, really, Boundary Beyond, its teeth have kind of fallen out. It was scary once, but I think it's less scary now. But Curse of Yig is, like, the -1 fist can also affect your fighter. We saw that happen with Lily. It killed 4 people, which, yes, was a skill issue for sure. We should have been playing around it. It definitely falls on, like, the skill issue bit there for sure. It's a card that you can beat just by playing smart. The thing about Windows Another Time too, it's like a timeline destabilization where it scales to be easier in the latter half too, because you can just choose to shovel something in. So it basically becomes a blank card later in the scenario. But again, like I said, this is a newfound respect for Curse of Yig, and maybe in 2 years I won't respect Curse of Yig anymore. But that motherfucker killed us 4 times, which is crazy. It killed me twice. And sometimes you're just like, hope I don't draw Curse of Yig or I'm dead, because it is, as it's a take 1 testless damage and horror. It really, like, actually is. Will it last long in the bracket? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. Ill Omen. It's an omen and a terror. It's a peril. Choose a location where there's at least one investigator. Place 1 doom in that location. Each investigator of the chosen location takes 1 horror. Versus Racked in Time, a card we've seen earlier. This is the one where it's Test Brain 3, and everyone in a shadow location must also do the test. If you fail, take 2 damage. And assets that are defeated by this effect, that are not defeated by this effect and assign damage, or shuffled into their owner's deck. Whew, this one's interesting. This one's a little bit interesting. Sorry, I'm just looking at this bracket come together. Again, I think this is actually like a pretty good matchup, because they both these cards have a similar sort of theme, which is that these are actually like cards that scale with the investigators, right? Like, if everyone is at the same location, you're all taking a horror. If everyone's at a shadow location, you're all doing this test, potentially taking 2 damage. So if Ill Omen was just place a doom on a location, I think this card would actually be a lot softer, right? Because I'm one of them crazy MFers who ain't scared of Ancient Evils, and I'm actually like happy to draw Ancient Evils. The majority of the time it's in the deck. But it's that horror, and I mean, like, in all fairness, Ill Omen, the Doom also actually works differently, because it's not actually an Ancient Evils. It's forever your Doom threshold is reduced, which up to a certain point is fine, because it like scales with the number of players. But as soon as you get that like extra player of Doom, you've fallen behind, which is going to happen. You usually probably get like 2 or more. Like, you usually get like 4 in 2-player, 5 in 3-player. If you're lucky, you get 3 or 2, which is great. But yeah, I'm with you, Ezekiel Abaddon, right? Like, I don't know if it's worse, but Ill Omen feels worse. And this is a video that's all about feels, so that's why we're going to advance Ill Omen here. Because it is. It just feels worse than Racked by Time. On to Bryn's, probably one of his least favorite cards in the entire cycle of Forgotten Age here, which is Ants. Ants Revelation, test foot 4. For each point you fail by, discard a random card from your hand, or choose and discard a card from your play area. Versus Cruel Interrogations, which is put Cruel Interrogations into play in your threat area. If an investigator has interviewed the subject, take 1 horror, and Cruel Interrogation gains Surge. You cannot take draw actions. Test Brain 2. If you succeed, discard Cruel Interrogations. So, Cruel Interrogations used to be a card that terrified me, and then there's one of my patrons who I've played with frequently on the channel, who is Dice Gods, where Dice Gods is really good at the very least pointing them out to me, but also like finding little tricks that make cards easier that I never really would like do before. An example of this is in Too Deep, you always leave clues on the second location, and then also he never interrogates the subject. He never interviews the subject. There's a reason why they put it on one of the first scenarios in the game, to trick you into making Cruel Interrogations worse, because all of them have an effect where if you interview someone or you do one of the things, it makes it worse. But Cruel Interrogations is the one that actually like makes this card have teeth. Otherwise, this card's actually really soft. So just don't interview people, and Cruel Interrogations doesn't matter anymore. Yes, you're going to want to get rid of it eventually, but it loses the horror, it loses the surge, which makes the card a lot more manageable. Ants, on the other hand, can be brutal. I don't think like it's it's bad. I'm not gonna say that Ants is like an easy card, but like cards that make you discard cards at random are always tough. And you can choose discard cards from your play area, so you can have some choice to make it easier. I think I'm gonna give this one to Ants though, mostly just because like I think it is easily scarier than Cruel Interrogations. So I'm putting Ants is missing must. You can choose it a little. But I mean, like, you still have to discard as much as you can, right? So, like, oh no, so you could choose to like lose cards. Okay, I think that. No, I think that. I don't think that's cheesing. I think that's like, I think that is. I think that's less. I mean, it is technically cheesing, but I wouldn't play with someone like that. I'd be like, get your head out of your ass, brother. Like, yeah, just do it. It has must, but it actually doesn't. Like, you're gonna lose 4 cards no matter what if you auto failed, even if you wanna. Unless you have no cards in hand or play, you're getting rid of a card, brother. I'm sorry. Okay. What does this card do? Oh, it's that one. Ants won't lose. Is Ants only in Is Ants only in Lost in the Wilds? It is only in Lost in the Wilds. So yeah, that does make it a bit softer. I still think Cruel Interrogations is a softer card. Because you have, I mean, like, this is coming from the perspective of not solo, because I unfortunately think that solo sucks. And I've played it a bit this year. It's not. I think the game gets better when you have at least 2 people to play with. So none of this is coming from the perspective of solo, which might change people. Oh my God, there's a little bird right outside my window. It might change perspectives compared to multiplayer and solo, because with that one, there's always someone who can clear it out for you. So it becomes less of a problem. In solo, yeah, I can see it. But again, I don't think solo is an enjoyable way to play. So I definitely don't do that. All right, we got Lightless Shadow. So this is a terror. Test foot 1. This test gets +1 difficulty where X is the current depth level. If you fail, take 2 damage. Shadowed, if there are no cultist enemies in play, take 1 horror and Shadowed gain surge. Otherwise, find the cultist enemy nearest to you. Place 1 doom on that enemy and test Brain X, where X is that enemy's fight value. If you fail, take 2 horror. I'm going to give this one to Shadowed. Honestly, both this and Bathophobia, the fear of bathing, from Depths of Yoth, I actually think are probably the cards that I don't really have like a fear of drawing them that much. It's crazy. Like, they might beat some cards in here, but I actually don't think Lightless Shadow is that scary of an encounter card. I think that Shadowed is the scarier card to me, so I'm going to give this one to Shadowed. I don't know how to explain it more other than the fact that I think that Depths of Yoth is such a well-designed scenario that these cards are actually like entirely fair, and they're really fun to play with, and like they feel good to draw, so that's why I'm never scared to draw them, because I think just Depths of Yoth is so tightly made and like really fun to play that they're not exactly like, they're just like totally reasonable. They're just like totally reasonable. They're just like good encounter cards, and like they're less scary than they read, and when they are scary, you can like probably close out the game before you die to them. There we go. I did explain it a little bit. This is a video. I should explain my thoughts, right? Alrighty. We are almost done seeing every card for the first time, and we're going to start eliminating cards soon. We're 1 hour and 10 in. These videos aren't short. I'll tell you that right now. These videos, they've never been short, and they never will be. I like talking, okay? Sue me. Serpent's Ire. If there are no serpent enemies in pursuit, Serpent's Ire gains surge. Otherwise, find the serpent enemy in pursuit with the highest fight value and spawn and engage with you. If the enemy is spawned by this effect, test foot X, where X is that enemy's fight value. If you fail, that enemy immediately attacks you. That's a tough card for sure. We have Poisonous Spores, Revelation, attached to your location. Forced at the end of the round, each investigator at the attached location who is poisoned takes 2 horror. Each investigator at the attached location who is not poisoned must put a set-aside poison weakness into play in his or her threat area instead, and then discard Poisonous Spores. The spores. So most of the time, this grabs those MFers that love Yig, that start in the pursuit area. It's the highest fight value. I mean, it can sometimes grab Big Papa Yig himself, but he's usually already out there by then. I mean, most of the time with Poisonous Spores, you can just move to another location, right? Like, most of the time, you can just, like, get out of that location and go somewhere else. But with Serpent's Ire, like, if you draw, like, an enemy, you got something from the pursuit. I mean, but, like, that whole thing is about... Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think, yeah, like, Yig always is already out by the time this happens. So it's usually grabbing the friends of Yig. Poison Spores, they're only in Heart of the Elders. This one's tough. This one's tough for me. Like, I think both are good encounter cards. Like, they're both, like, not... Like, neither of these cards are friendly, right? But I think, like, most of the time, if you get caught in a Poison Spores, you're unlucky. Number one, you're either unlucky because, like, you're on the first location and it gets there and, like, that sucks. But I think that's less of an issue with Poison Spores. It's like Ancient Evils being the problem in Essex County Express, not because of Ancient Evils, but because of the scenario design around it, right? And I think that's the same for Poisonous Spores. It's less of a thing that, like, Poison Spores is bad, and more so the fact that, like, the scenario just gave you the low roll, right? Which can happen. Because most of the time, yeah, you can just kind of, like, leave, right? You can just kind of, like, leave. Poison Spores, the No Way Trash Backer, and then the same back. They are, like the No Way Back one, they are... Oh. Again, I think they're both, like, I think they're both tough encounter cards. I think I'm going to give it to Serpent's Ire, though, because I think Serpent's Ire has caused me more problems overall than Poison Spores has. And whenever Poison Spores has poisoned me, I actually laugh about it more because I was just like, I fell into the perfect trap of getting Poison Spores. So, like, it was actually more on me playing poorly than Poison Spores actually getting me or low rolling. So I think I'm going to give this one to Serpent's Ire. I think Poison Spores can probably work well in the loser's bracket, and we'll see if it can make a little bit of a resurgent and maybe come back up into the winner's bracket. We'll see. Probably not, but we'll see. Oh, thanks for our content. Wish you a good weekend. Thank you, Jack Smith. That's very kind of you. I wish you a good weekend as well. It's my birthday on Monday, so I'm going to celebrate my birthday this weekend. So now I'm going to celebrate it because of you. So thank you. I'm going to celebrate even harder. Okay. We got Children of Elusia. This is put into play next to the agenda deck. It's a scheme. Each Serpent enemy gets +1 fight and +1 evade at the end of the round. Discard 1 copy of Children of Elusia from play. Max once per round versus Snake Scourge, the card that blanks all your items. This one's easy to me. I would always draw Children of Elusia. Yes, the +1 fight and +1 evade can matter. However, you're a goon. Why are you not attacking at 10? Right? Like, why are you not, like, just, like, having your value be so high that +1 doesn't matter? That's kind of like what it really comes down to. So for at least for my play style, the Children of Elusia is rarely an issue. So we're going to go with Snake Scourge. I think Children of Elusia is a card that I'm, like, always happy to draw because usually you don't have an enemy to deal with as well. You just kind of like, well, we didn't get an encounter card for one player. Let's go. That's awesome. Whoopsie. All right. Let's keep this going. We're almost done reading the cards out for the first time. Interesting. Okay. Between Worlds, it's a hex. Put Between Worlds in play as another world location with 3 shrouds and 1 clue and move to it. It is connected to Nexus of Nakai. If drawn from the exploration deck, this exploration isn't considered unsuccessful. Is still considered unsuccessful. 4. So at the end of the round, each investigator here takes 1 damage and 1 horror. If there are no investigators at this location, discard it and move each enemy here to the Nexus of Nakai. Versus Lost Humanity. This is a test brain 5. For each point you fail by, remove the top card of your deck from the game. If there are fewer than 10 total cards in your hand, deck, and discard pile, you are driven insane. Can I ask a question? Because we have a few people here today. We have a good chunk of people. Has anyone actually seen somebody driven insane by Lost Humanity? Because I think the flavor of it is really cool. But really this card, like, is kind of just mill 5, right? Oh, no, sorry, exile 5. Yeah, because that's what I thought. Yes? All right, we got our first yes. That's great. Just horrible luck. Yeah, so, like, that's the thing, right? Like, even in that situation where it happens, it's, like, so rare that it's basically practically flavor text. I think the card's really cool. I think the fear of the card is also really interesting. But I think we can all agree that, like, Lost Humanity is pretty soft the majority of the time. Not quite exile. I'm talking about, like, so I went mill and then exile for, like, I'm talking, like, in Magic terms. So it's not actually exile, but it's mill. Like, I said mill at first, then I changed it to exile because just using Magic terms to describe Arkham. Yeah. And we're going to give it to Between Worlds. I think Lost Humanity is very soft. I'm always happy to draw it. Because it means one day, maybe, I'll be driven insane. Maybe. Yeah, we'll talk about Between Worlds when it's actually, like, in a relevant matchup that it doesn't just crush in. Because, like, that was just a match that it was just made to win. It was practically a bye round. All right, we have Shattered Ages. Test Brain 4. If you fail, place 1 clue from the token pool on each location other than the Nexus of Nakai. That's annoying as hell. Versus Ancestral Fear, which is the one where you place a Doom on a location to discard Ancestral Fear or put in the victory display. It also has Surge. Don't forget that. So Shattered Ages certainly isn't, like, an easy encounter card, right? Like, it can cause problems. Because, like, it's basically stealing, depends on the number of actions you have, like the number of locations you have, right? But it's essentially giving you, like, say you had 5 locations in play, you effectively lost 5 actions. And also, it means that you're now taking damage or horror when you're moving into those locations, if you did previously clear them out. And say, for example, an Acolyte spawned on one of them. Versus Ancestral Fear, the card that I like drawing the least. But I got to take my emotions out of it, right? We got to, like, look at this a little bit analytically, at least for a little bit, before I just give it to Ancestral Fear. Shattered Ages doesn't hurt you. It just steals actions from you, which is not good. But it also doesn't actually steal actions from you. If you pass it, that's great. Ancestral Fear places a Doom or gets a Vengeance that surges. And that's a nightmare. Chat. I understand the theory behind Ages, but I've felt threatened by failing it. Yeah, that's kind of like where I am too, right? Like, it's caused me problems, but I think there's other things. Bye, Beard. There's other things that have, like, caused me more problems, right? Like, in that scenario, there's, like, scarier things than that. I don't know, man. I think I'm going to give this one to Ancestral Fear as well. I just don't like Ancestral Fear. I will say, though, I'm actually pretty excited because I don't think we have a clear front runner in our top of our bracket right now. I don't think there's a card in here that I think we'll obviously take it right now. Feels like Shattered Age would be worse if Ancestral Fear didn't have Surge. I think, yeah, that's also a pretty fair read, I think. I mean, but like at the same time, like, I'm thinking, like, what does Shattered Ages actually do? And at a certain point, not much, right? But at the same time, it also can do a lot. It's a very interesting card. But I actually don't have a lot of memories that I can at least recall that caused me to crumble and fall apart. It's interesting. Because it reads scary, but I can't actually recall a situation in which it was super duper scary. All right, last two cards that we have not seen, so I'm not going to be reading the cards anymore for people who are only listening. Just so you know, just to save myself the time and voice for this. Conspiracy of Blood. Attach Conspiracy of Blood to the current agenda. Attached agenda gets -1 Doom threshold. Each cultist enemy gains Parlay, test brain 4 if you succeed. Discard 1 copy of Conspiracy of Blood from play. If you fail, place 1 Doom on this enemy. Versus Bathophobia, test brain 1. This test gets +X difficulty, where X is the current depth level. If you fail, take 2 horror. I'm going to give this one to Bathophobia, mostly just because effects like Conspiracy of Blood don't really scare me that much. Again, if we look at Threads of Fate, we have like it's not about like how much you lose, it's how much you win by, right? Bats are scarier than blood, let's be real. Amen. Finally, someone said it. Finally, someone said it. Thank you. I've been thinking it for years. But mostly, yeah, just like it doesn't really matter. It's also really easy to get rid of if you do want to. Also, sometimes, like, yeah, sure, it isn't, but, like, I don't care. It's Threads of Fate, right? It's mostly just about, like, how good you do as opposed to how bad you do. So it really changes the threat of cards like this. Okay. Should we see, we can look at the bracket. This is our top 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 cards. But now we're going to move down into our losers bracket for a little bit. To get some matches going on here, and we're actually going to start eliminating some cards. I know everyone's like, only Justin is crazy enough to do this a double elimination tournament. It's because I think that sometimes some cards deserve another look, so we're going to be doing that here. It's also a bit more fun for me. I like double elimination. It's just the kind of guy I am. Okay. Oh, well, we have Conspiracy in Blood is back already. All right, time to start killing cards. Conspiracy in Blood. We just talked about this card with a Tear in Time, which is the Rotting Remains that you can also lose actions for. Again, I think this is pretty easy. Conspiracy of Blood had 2 back-to-back matches, and unfortunately already is walking away as a goodbye. Thank you, Conspiracy in Blood, for everything you've done, but I just don't think you're that scary of a card. So, time for you to rot in the graveyard. All right, let's keep going. Honestly, it's going to be pretty easy for a little bit. These first few as we just eliminate some of the dud cards. All right, Lost Humanity, the card from City of Archives, and Creeping Darkness, the one from Shattered Aeons. Again, I think Lost Humanity is pretty simple, so we're going to get rid of that one. I think the card is basically just nothing. You have to be very unlucky to actually die by it. So I'm not too concerned about that as a card. It's cool and flavorful, but I don't think it is that scary. I'm always happy to draw it. All right. Next up. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Honestly, also looking at it, I think what makes, compared to other treachery bracket battles, which actually is kind of the reason why I do this, is that a lot of the cards that in the previous ones that made it to the end are like cards that you find in the final scenarios, right? This one, these are cards that are from scenario 1 onward. So I think that's probably why Forgotten Age is also harder, because its treachery cards are just generally more difficult from like scenario 1 on. All right, Poisonous Spores and Pitfall. This is a shame that I have to eliminate one of these cards here, because I think they are both like I think they're both good encounter cards. I think they're both fun designed encounter cards. I think they're both well designed. And I think they also are both like namesakes of Forgotten Age. However, with all that said, I think I am going to go with Pitfall, because every time I've been poisoned by poison spores, it's because of luck versus because of poor play. And with Pitfall, it's just like, it's a threat that can keep coming. It's also a peril, so no one can help you with it. So we're going to give this one to Pitfall. Goodbye, Poisonous Spores. You may burst in peace. Okay. Okay. This is an interesting battle. I have to think about this one. We have Cruel Interrogations and Nobody's Home. Interesting. So, it's been a long time since we talked about Nobody's Home. I think that was like one of our first matches. Yeah, it was like match number 4. I mean, I think ultimately both of these cards are pretty manageable. I don't think either one of them are like crazy scary. I think I'm going to give this one to Cruel Interrogations, because I think Cruel Interrogations can stop you from winning, and Nobody's Home can just like stop you from, I don't know, getting some victory. And I think in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather win than like get one more victory. So I think we're going to give it to Cruel Interrogations just because of that. But I think neither of these cards are particularly menacing. All right. Window to Another Time and Final Mistake. Ooh, intriguing. I think both these cards are actually pretty scary cards. It's a question, which one's scarier? I mean, if you're playing right, this is always just a foot 2 test, which is super passable. I was talking some shit about Boundary Beyond earlier, but I still respect the scenario, so I think I'm going to give this one to Window to Another Time for that. I think it is just, like I said, you can actually like play around Final Mistake quite a bit. And if I'm on a location with no Doom, I think that's really nice, and it becomes a lot easier. So I'm going to give this one to Window to Another Time. I think ultimately, though, I do think both these cards are really good. And this was just a tough matchup for Final Mistake to come out on top, I think. If this was up against like any of the cards we just saw previously, pretty much, I think it would have also gone to Final Mistake would have won that one. But, you know, sometimes the shuffle happens and you just got to let it happen, right? Okay. All right, we got Yithian Presence and Low on Supplies. So Yithian Presence is the one where you cannot trigger investigate locations or trigger action abilities on encounter cards when a Yithian enemy is at your location. I'm going to give this one to Low on Supplies. It's just like, I think Low on Supplies is easier, but like if people are gaining resources and they're losing 2 resources every turn, I think Low on Supplies does add up. And honestly, Yithian Presence kind of just doesn't do anything. So we're going to give this one to Low on Supplies. Oopsie. Getting my my hotkeys all mixed up. Interesting. Interesting. So we have Overgrowth and Deep Dark. Cannot explore. Only one, no more than one clue can be discovered. I think ultimately Deep Dark is probably going to be more of a hassle for this one, so we're going to give this one to Deep Dark. Again, I think I'm relatively happy to draw Deep Dark over Overgrowth, but I think that Deep Dark has caused more problems in the long term that I just kind of forget about sometimes. But I think so Deep Dark I'm going to give to the scarier card here as we continue to eliminate cards from this loser's bracket. Okay. We got Words of Powers and Arrows from the Trees. I'm going to give this to Arrows from the Trees. Again, most of the time I'm playing 2 or 3 player. If Words of Powers matters, you can just get rid of it. Just spend the 2 actions, just kill it. Arrows from the Trees, in the wrong time, you draw multiples of them, and it's like, good night, you're dead, you're gone. No one likes you, and you are a corpse. You're this guy. You're this MFer who's just dead in the jungle, and you're going to decompose, and no one's going to remember you. And this is just a guy going like this, look at my hands. I don't know. Like I said, I just think the double action weaknesses are pretty easy to manage in multiplayer games. Just like, have someone get rid of them. Or like, you know, do it yourself and then do what you need to do. I think there's just so many variables that makes Words of Power just kind of crumble. I admit that it can have a pretty high ceiling if you get unlucky or like the wrong draw or like a failed test when you shouldn't have, but I think that's a case that can be made for a lot of encounter cards as well. Deep Dark is a damn mosquito that keeps buzzing in your ears. Yeah, getting a back-to-back Deep Dark is not fun. Okay. Continuing on with our losers bracket, we got Shattered Ages and a Tear in Time. Again, I'm agreeing. I forget who it was who said it earlier. But like Shattered Ages, I think it reads scarier than it actually is the majority of the time. Tear in Time is still just a Rotting Remains, and a Rotting Remains I think is always just like always potentially a scary encounter card. So that's why I'm going to give this one to a Tear in Time. I think that's just like how it should be. Okay. All right, keeping this going. We'll get through this. We're killing it. We're having a great time too. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, so neither of these cards scare me. We have Children of Illusia, where the serpent enemies get +1 fight and +1 evade, and we have Creeping Darkness. I think Creeping Darkness, so this is the one where you place a Doom on Creeping Darkness and the formless spawn gets bigger. I think this one's just gonna win because it adds a Doom. I just don't. I can't find any fear when I look at Children of Illusia. But I think with Creeping Darkness, while I also can't find fear, I think that Doom is just like the reason it has to win, right? Because like nothing versus nothing in an Ancient Evils is going to be scarier, right? Like it just has to be by the nature of it, right? Yeah, Children also takes itself out. It's very true. So yeah, I think I'm going to give this one to Creeping Darkness. Creeping Darkness is just like continuing to just creep by. Like, I think every time Creeping Darkness has showed up, where it faced... I was like, this card's not scary, but it's like, it's just inching its way through the loser's bracket right now. We'll see if it can beat its next loser as this keeps going. All right. I always love doing these. If you love this as well, make sure to like the video so it makes me do more of them. One would say it creeps its way. A man smarter than me would, for sure. All right, we got Lightless Shadow and Pitfall. two very similar cards. Lightless Shadow is a foot test that scales with a depth level and take 2 damage, and the Pitfall is the grasping hands are shuffled into the deck. I think that just by the way that Pitfall works, I think it's going to just be a scarier thing for the table as a whole, so we're going to give this one to Pitfall. Very similar cards, though, and I think Pitfall is just the scarier card of the two of them, if you just look at it exactly as the tin, and it's actually a great matchup because they are both so similar. So we're going to give this one to our good friend Pitfall. Again, the loser's bracket is a little bit easier than the winner's bracket because it's like the cards that are... Yeah, Peril is brutal when you freely play with newer players. That is true because, like, they're like, can you help me? And you're like, no, this is all on you. And also, like, they have to make decisions. But it's definitely tough for them. All right. Racked by Time and Cruel Interrogations. Yeah. Cruel Interrogations, honestly, was on borrowed time after getting through Nobody's Home. I think Racked by Time is just a harder effect because it can affect multiple investigators. So we're going to give this one to Racked by Time. Congratulations. Okay. Keeping this train going, we're almost back up to the winner's bracket. Ooh, this is an interesting matchup, and I'm curious what people at home think about this one. So we have Entombed. This is the one you cannot disengage from enemies and moves. It's a foot 4 or fist 4 test that becomes easier each time you do it, if you fail, rather, versus the Window to Another Time, which is the one where you can shuffle an ancient location or place a doom on the current agenda. So I think ultimately both of these cards aren't the worst. But the question is, which one would I rather draw? A poorly timed Entombed can be crushing. Most of the time, though, it's just a double action that you have to test for. Albeit an action you have to test for is usually worse than a double action no test. Especially if it takes you 2 actions. Multiple people can help you get out, which makes it even easier, and it's 2 skills, so you have a higher chance of finding the one that's right for you. But then we got Window to Another Time. I think I'd still rather draw Entombed. Time Roller has it going. So I'm going to give this one to Window to Another Time. I think I would still rather draw Entombed. Entombed sucks, admittedly, but I think there's a lot of counterplay to get rid of it. So ultimately, I think just like the... Yes, you can still evade with Entombed. But I mean, being separated and like having to evade when you probably aren't good because you still have that foot 4 is a little bit spookier. I don't know. I think like both these cards can be like very bad in the wrong situation, but I think I'd rather draw Entombed over Losing Progress or Ancient Evilines in Boundary Beyond. Okay. All right, everybody. Say bye to low on supplies. Say bye to low on supplies. It's going up against Timeline Destabilization. I think this one's pretty easy. This one is also just going to be Timeline Destabilization. I'm pretty happy when I draw low on supplies most of the time. And I don't think I'm like ever happy when I draw Timeline Destabilization. Shuffling it into the Explore deck sucks because you get into like an Explore lock, which is kind of a nightmare. Like, it's kind of a nightmare, and you just can't escape it, and you're like, please, I want to go out. Because if you draw from the Exploration deck and you fail, you have to shuffle it back into the Exploration deck, and you might see it again. So we're going to give this one to Timeline Destabilization. This is, I would say, a pretty interesting matchup as well. We have no turning back in Deep Dark. It's so you just like on the blind play. I think that like no turning back is worse, but you just bring a freaking pickaxe, man. Like you just always. See you later. Have a good one. Thanks for joining, Farts and Friends. Have a good rest of your night. Like you just. I always bring a pickaxe now just to like counter this card, and I think it's like worth it for it to just get rid of it. Deep Dark also is relatively soft, but like multiple Deep Darks, as I said, can just be a problem. Who has no turning back fought so far? Creeping Darkness and lost. Oh, it won that one. It lost to Voice of the Jungle. Deep Dark lost to Snake Scourge. Came through all these. No turning back. That's why, because it's in the winner's bracket of the losers round. It's tough. It's tough. But Deep Dark beat Overgrowth, and No Turning Back is very similar to Overgrowth, so I gotta give this one to Deep Dark. To just follow the trends the rules that I set up for myself, right? We gotta at least, like, say we're consistent. Okay. Interesting. Lost in Time and Arrows from the Trees. This is an interesting one. I think I'm going to go with Lost in Time. Trying to get back up to the winner's bracket. Try not to think too hard about these. Just going with my guts when I see these two cards. I would rather draw Arrows from the Trees because, like, a lot of the time it's 2 damage, or it's like 1 damage, or it's like that. And then, like, they become easier. But I think Lost in Time, I've had more memories with Lost in Time being game-breaking than Arrows from the Trees. Sorry, back-breaking, not game-breaking. Game-breaking is generally a positive for the player. Back-breaking is the inverse. All right. We're back up to the winner's bracket. And now things get interesting because one of these cards is going to win the whole thing. It's going to win everything, and we're going to go through this. One of the most miserable time you can have in the Forgotten Age being is Lost in Time Magnet. Yeah, 100%. Okay. Lost in the Wilds and The Secret Must Be Kept. So The Secret Must Be Kept is a scary card, but it only exists in one scenario, and you can game it quite a bit. But in that scenario, it's really bad. You cannot move or explore, but it's also a Rotting Remains. They're both brain 3s. I mean, I think The Secret Must Be Kept is a scary encounter card, right? On the high point, if you're playing basic, this can deal you, what, 3 and 3? That's crazy for a 5 test. If you're playing the Return to, this can deal you 4 and 4 for a 6 test. The Cannot Move or Explore on Lost in the Wild sucks. You're going to see on more scenarios, but does that actually make the card worse? I don't think so. Yeah, it's also a peril, so no commits or help from friends. I think I gotta give it The Secret Must Be Kept. It is a very scary encounter card, even if the scenario that it's in doesn't really have the stakes that make it. I just have to like look at the numbers, right? Because at a certain point, this really just comes down to math. As all things do, it all comes back to math. Okay. All right, we got Voice of the Jungle and Serpent's Call. Serpent's Call is the card that I did not want to advance earlier, and I almost gave Overgrowth the win. Versus Voice of the Jungle, a card that I think overall is pretty chill until it isn't. Like, maybe I'm just crazy for not being scared of Serpent's Call. Like, maybe that's just, like, the wrong thing. I have a hard time being scared of a card that can be so swingy, right? Like, either you get something that cripples you, or you get like something that's soft, or the reality is you get something that's like right in the middle. The only problem is I don't think Voice of the Jungle is the card that's going to beat Serpent's Call. I think The Secret Must Be Kept is going to beat Serpent's Call. So I think that that's going to happen in our next matchup. But I think Voice of the Jungle is going to go down into the loser's bracket here. I would rather draw Voice of the Jungle most of the time over Serpent's Call, just looking at these. I know I almost gave it to Overgrowth, but I've kind of come to my senses a little bit. All right. We got Captive Mind and Creeping Poison. I think I'm going to give this one to Creeping Poison. Captive Mind is scary, but it also at the same time, it's not scary for the majority of the time. And as I said again earlier about Creeping Poison, this is a card that does nothing until it does everything, and when it does everything, it's your least favorite card. It doesn't matter who draws it, you're going to be taking damage if you're poisoned, and it's the reason why you don't get poisoned. It's the main reason why getting poisoned is bad, and why you like try to avoid that with all the power that you can avoid. All right. Keep the show going. You gotta pick up the pace. Gotta pick up the pace. Gotta do I have a costume change coming up and a dance number, so get ready for that. Okay. Snakebite and Cursive Yig. So this is the test 3 foot, 5 damage to an ally asset, or you become poisoned with direct damage, versus the Cursive Yig, the card that's killed 4 of us this time. I still think I would rather draw Cursive Yig over Snakebite any day of the week, except if it would kill me. I mean, realistically, if I didn't have an ally asset in play and like 1 direct damage was going to kill me, these two are actually pretty good parallels for one another. However, Snakebite also gives you the poisoned if you do die to it. I just think like getting poisoned is scarier than dying. Like I actually do. Like if I had the choice between getting defeated and taking 1 physical trauma in the Forgotten Age, or getting poisoned, I'd rather just die and take the trauma. So I think we're going to give this one to Snakebite. And then we have the poison matchup coming up next, which should be pretty fun in the next round. Can you take 5 damage of Snakebite if you have a 1 health ally? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can. Because enemy, I think they can take, like, because you take, like, otherwise, like, for example, you could never soak this on an ally. This basically just reads like kill an ally asset you control. Because even if you have, you can still put the damage on a 2 health, a 3 health, and it still works. You don't need a 5 damage ally to put the damage on this, because you're only dealing damage to 1. It's basically like, the flavor of it is that they're taking the damage for you. Otherwise, I don't think there's actually an ally that can soak a Snakebite for you. Okay. I think this match is going to be pretty easy. We have Ill Omen and Ants. Ill Omen is probably the card that feels the worst to draw in the Forgotten Age. Ants is scary and it has Bryn's number, but I think we are going to go with Ill Omen for this one. I think it's just a spookier card. I think it is. It feels bad. It can hit multiple people. The doom stays forever in most of the scenarios. It can really ruin the pacing you have for Depths of Yoth, and then suddenly, like, the Harbinger or Yig is out sooner than expected. So I think even in the things where the doom can go away, it is a scary card no matter what. So we're going to give this one to our good friend Ill Omen, which is a card I do not like drawing in this game. Oopsie, you probably want some ads right now while I'm changing these cards, huh? I know the ads are like extra as hell, but I love them. I'm basically just like, it's so you don't, like the matchup, you don't have to see me changing the cards. But I love them. And I hope you love them too. Alright. Shadowed and Serpent's Ire. Serpent's Ire just barely squeaked by against Poisonous Spores, and Poisonous Spores is already eliminated. So honestly, Serpent's Ire is here on just matchup. I don't think the card's like soft by any means. I think that Serpent's Ire can be a tough card, but I think we're going to give this one to Shadowed still. Shadowed is just like a rough encounter card, because even if it does nothing, it just like kicks you in the nuts before it goes. So we're going to give this one to Shadowed, I think, for this. Okay. All right, now to give this card an actual read. Now to actually break this card down. So Between Two Worlds versus Snake Scourge, by the way. Snake Scourge is the one that blanks your items. Put Between Two Worlds into play, another world location, 3 Shroud, and 1 Clue, and move to it to connect next to the Kai. Drawn from Exploration, it's still considered unsuccessful. Yep. This one's got to be Between Two Worlds, right? I think that card actually can just like absolutely ruin your plan in the final scenario. I think it's probably, I mean, it's the Shattered Aeons cards that's still in the top 8 at this point. Like it made it to the top 8, so it's probably just like generically the scariest card in Shattered Aeons, right? Because if your fighter draws it and there's enemies, and like say for example your Clover drew an enemy and then your Goon drew an enemy, suddenly your Goon drew Between Two Worlds, suddenly you're sucked into another place, and there's like you have to spend not only the action to get out of here. You might take some damage in the process, but you have to spend all the action to get back, especially if you've already made it into the second part of the scenario. So I think Between Two Worlds is actually a scary card. I said we were going to talk about it once it got past Lost Humanity. I think Between Two Worlds could potentially make a good run. I think the card is actually pretty terrifying. So I think I'd rather draw Snake Scourge easily over the Between Two Worlds. My old friend. The card I like drawing the least. Ancestral Fear versus Bathophobia. Ancestral Fear just feels bad, man. I know, like, there's probably someone out there who is like, but Justin, you say you like Ancient Evils. Yeah, Ancient Evils doesn't surge. This card, Ancient Evils, and surges. Like, that's rough, man. And then if you don't want it to surge, you can just get some Vengeance. And like, yeah, Vengeance is fine until suddenly it isn't. And suddenly it's bad. And suddenly Yig's breathing down your neck being like, why'd you kill all my snakes? And Bathophobia just deals you 2 horror. Again, this is like that one card that I already forgot the name of. I know Bathophobia because the name's funny, the fear of baths. I don't remember the name for the one in, maybe Lightless Shadow, is it? Maybe it's that one. But just like this card feels just perfectly fair in the Forgotten, in Depths of Yoth, right? Where it's scary, and then it isn't, and then it's like over and you win. Isn't Bathophobia fear of death? Oh, 100%. It's called a joke. I'm telling a joke here. It's obviously not the fear of baths. Like, obviously not. But, you know, that's Bathophobia. It's the fear of baths. That's what the card says. I'm going to give this one to Ancestral Fear, though. Because, again, I just think, like, the card is... It's not, like, an easy card, but it's not Ancestral Fear. Which you see on like scenario 2, and it reminds you that it's here. And honestly, I think Ancestral Fear is a chance to take it. I really do think it has a chance, for me anyway, of being the scariest card for me in Forgotten Age. I hate drawing Ancestral Fear. I'm never happy to see it. I'm never happy to see Ancestral Fear. All right, let's eliminate a few more cards. Going down to see who the winner of our losers bracket is. For like, I generally view like the winner of the losers bracket as like the 3rd scariest card usually. Curse of Yig and a Tarantine. Interesting. Man, Curse of Yig is so soft until it isn't. Again, This is coming from the new perspective I have over this last year, where Curse of Yig got 4 kills. And after that, I don't think I can ever, like, look at Curse of Yig the same because I've seen what it can do. Is it scarier than a Rotting Remains that you can also lose actions on? I don't think so. I think Terran Time has a higher ceiling than Curse of Yig does. Generally, like, yes, Curse of Yig can kill you, but it also can, like, not kill you, and you can just, like, get rid of it. I've seen Terror Time also cause chaos. I don't know, man. Like, I wish I didn't die to Curse of Yig twice, because then it would just change things. But I think the Curse of Yig stuff comes from me just playing bad, so I think I'm gonna, like... I think I'm gonna keep that in mind. That the Curse of Yig's deaths were because I was bad, and Travis and Bryn also were like, we gotta just, we're just, this is how we have to do it. So I don't want to, the reason I'm not saying Travis and Bryn are bad, because only I may say I am bad. I cannot say they are bad. Those are the rules. Okay. Captive Mind. And Creeping Darkness. All right, Creeping Darkness, is it finally time for you to go? Or are you going to just keep creeping your way up in this? So Captive Mind is the test is 0. Well, either one of these is going to lose to Terran Time, right? Like, that's just how this is going to go. I think I don't want to think too much about the loser's bracket, because if I dwell too much down here, I think I'm just going to go with my gut. We just have to go with our gut when we look in the loser's bracket. We don't want to spend too much time mulling over these cards, so we're going to just give it to Captive Mind. I think it's scarier in the late game. And, like, Nexus of the Creeping Darkness, I just don't know, like, what it really does too much to make me actually, like, remember it being too much of an issue, you know? Honestly, I kind of just ignore the whatever the big old goo guy is in Shattered Aeons. But also, like, I kind of don't like that scenario that much, really. Honestly, Forgotten Age is lucky that its highs are so high, right? Forgotten Age is lucky that its highs are so high. All right, we got Voice of the Jungle and Pitfall. I'm going to go with Pitfall again for this one. Voice of the Jungle is scarier, but, like, is scary too. But you have a lot of ways to play around Voice of the Jungle, so we're going to go with that. Yeah. Easy. Okay, keeping this going. Lost in the Wilds and Racked by Time. I think Racked by Time is scary. But so is Lost in the Wilds. I'm very curious about this one. I think both of these are scary cards. Lost in the Wilds is coming from the top. It lost a Secret Must Be Kept. It beat Lost in Time. Racked by Time. Lost to Ill Omen. Beat Final Mistake. Final Mistake, I think, is eliminated, right? Yeah, it has. I think I'm going to go with Lost in the Wilds as well, Stone Cold Stunfisk. I think, like, Racked by Time is scary, but I think that, like, Lost in the Wilds, I think, has a higher... Not ceiling, because I think Racked by Time literally has a higher ceiling, but I think Lost in the Wilds has, a more commonly higher floor than Racked by Time does, so that's why I got to give this one to that. Oh, I got the mute in before the sneeze. Am I a professional or what? All right. Oopsie. All right, we got Bathophobia, the fear of baths, and Window to Another Time. Is it over for Window to Another Time? I think it is. Again, it's scary in Boundary Beyond, but I think Boundary Beyond gets pretty chill after a while. So I think I'm going to give this one to Bathophobia. And I know the other one, the Lightless Shadow, I mean, it did go up against, like, practically its twin with Pitfall. So, like, for example, I think if Bathophobia went against Timeline Destabilization, it would also just, it's probably going to go against that coming up in the next scenario. I was like, it's going to lose, and that's what's going to be happening in Bathophobia's next match. All right. Keeping this going. We got Snake Scourge, and we got Timeline Destabilization. I think this one's also pretty easy. I think Snake Scourge has, like, those moments where it's going to be really bad. But I think Timeline Destabilization is going to cause more problems in the grand scheme of things. A lot of time you're going to get Snake Scourge and your deck's not going to care too much, and you're just going to be like, well, I'm going to just keep chunking around, and I'm not going to worry. Sometimes, yes, it can steal your items as the goon. That happened to me this year, or last year, whenever Eric and I played the Forgotten Age. I don't know. My timeline is destabilized. So, like, that's just kind of how it goes. But I think that, like, generally Snake Scourge is going to be softer than it's going to be harder. So we're going to go with Timeline Destabilization for this one. All right. Serpent's Ire and Deep Dark. Man, Deep Dark is such an interesting card. I think it's such a good design, too. Because, like, I mean, like, it punishes Mystic Cloovers who are using their spells to get things, but it, like, really, like, doesn't hit, like, the Rogues or the Survivor Investigators. It hits the Seeker ones pretty hard. But, I mean, like, most of the time they can also just get by being Bookfee Shroud. I just like the card. Is it scarier than Serpent's Ire? I'm looking at both because I'm pretty sure both of these cards are in Depths of Yoth. Because Serpent's Ire is from Depths of Yoth, obviously, because it works with the Pursuit area. Deep Dark is there too. And I think if I'm using this, if I had both these cards, it really depends on the situation of when I would want to draw either of these. So it's when it becomes a problem. You know, it'd be neat if the Investigator with a torch could ignore Deep Dark for themselves. Yeah, that would be pretty sick. Be good flavor, too. I think I'm going to give this one to Serpent's Ire. Because I've been in situations where Deep Dark has been a problem. But, like, a Serpent's Ire, like, say, for example, your goon has 2 enemies, right? And then suddenly, your Seeker, like, your Guardian has 2 enemies, your Seeker 2 locations away cleaning up clues, grabs an enemy, and now suddenly, like, they have Serpent's Ire and they have to, like, deal with this thing. I think just generally Serpent's Ire is going to be stronger. I think either of these could have won the match, and I think, like, I wouldn't blink to look at the other side of it. So I'm going to be giving this one to that. Stone Cold Stunfisk, 34 months of the Golden Table. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being you. Thank you for using your Twitch Prime on us. I really appreciate it. I think, though, honestly, it's like a close matchup for this one for sure. But Deep Dark, you had a good run, so enjoy your playing some golf now that your time in the bracket's over. Okay, keeping this going. We have 2 good cards that are actually very similar. We have Ants and Lost in Time. I think Lost in Time has got to be worse here. Pokeball is a pretty tough set. Ants, being able to lose them from hand makes it a lot softer. And there's also a test, so you can maybe fail by a little bit less. Lost in Time doesn't ask. The first Lost in Time is fine, usually. The second Lost in Time is absolutely brutal. You need to be aware of Lost in Time more than you need to be aware of Ants. IMO, generally, because Ants only shows up in, like, 1 scenario, maybe 2. Yeah. I think it only shows up in one, right? It's only in the first part of it. So we're going to go with Lost in Time for this one. Whoopsie. Okay. We are going to eliminate a few more cards here as we keep working our way through the loser's bracket. But now I think things should generally be pretty easy. A Tear in Time versus Captive Mind. This one, it's going to be a Tear in Time. Captive Mind, I think, has had some favorable matchups, but I think overall Captive Mind is softer for the majority of the scenario and is only really scary near the end. And I think Tear in Time is just going to do more damage to you as you are playing Arkham Horror, the card game, than Captive Mind is. You might have times where Captive Mind is going to be a big problem, but I think generally you'll be able to recoup the losses that it gave you, unless you're very far behind on tempo, in which case you need to ask yourself, why am I far behind on tempo, and not if why is Captive Mind such a problem, but generally those questions might actually have the same answers. Oh, this is an interesting one. Pitfall and Lost in the Wilds. Interesting. I mean, I think it's just got to be Lost in the Wilds, right? Going back to what I said earlier about Pitfall, there comes a time when the exploration deck doesn't need to be moved anymore, and Pitfall just doesn't do anything. So we're going to be, I'm going to be giving this one to Lost in the Wilds, going back to what I said previously about that. And who would have thought rotting remain effects are good, right? Who would have thought about that? Okay, I already spoiled this matchup, so we're going to work through this one pretty quickly. Honestly, it's going to take me longer to get the cards on the slide than it's going to be to actually select my winner. Bathophobia and Timeline Destabilization. This is very similar to Voice of the Jungle and Pitfall, and I think Timeline Destabilization is just the scarier card between the two of these. Bathophobia goes away once you're done with it. If you fail, that's not the same true for Timeline Destabilization. You can get ultimately into a loop with that and just like never get out of it. You can just live in that forever, which would be a nightmare. But isn't life a nightmare? No. Honestly, it always bothered me where there was a time like my sense of humor was always like, I'm depressed, not life isn't worth living. Just as a joke, because, you know, I found it funny. Which, you know, maybe it isn't, but I found it funny. And then like now it's like the new in joke, and I'm like, man, that was my joke like 10 years ago. Give me my joke back. That was mine. And now I don't like seeing it. So even the saying like life isn't worth living. Life is worth living. It's great. Go buy some vacuums from Bob. That's your reason for living, right? Serpent's Ire and Lost in Time. I think Serpent's Ire has been living on borrowed time for the most part. So we're going to give this one to Lost in Time. Dude, they say time so much in this campaign. Like, I get it. But like lost, time, blah, blah. There's so much of that in the Forgotten Age. All right. We're going to go back up to our winner's bracket here where we have our top 8, which I'll quickly just show. So this is how we're looking, and we have we're going to have our bottom 8 coming up soon. And then we just keep this puppy going. Exciting. We're nearing the end, though. Just 2 hours in. Like I said, these videos aren't short. If you want short discussion videos, watch our list videos. That's usually where it's kept. Okay. We have The Secret Must Be Kept and The Serpent's Call. So again, Serpent's Call has been the card that I haven't like really been that scared of, but I can understand why people are scared of it. And I think between these two cards, I would rather draw the Serpent's Call because it has a chance of not being The Secret Must Be Kept, even though at the same time it has a chance of being to The Secret Must Be Kept. I know they're not in the same scenario, but I'm just saying, like, in the context, if I had to choose to draw one of these two cards in a chaos-like situation, I would choose to draw the Serpent's Call over The Secret Must Be Kept because, again, there's a chance It is not the secret must be kept. However, I don't think the secret must be kept is going to win the bracket, though. I think I feel like I know who is going to be my bracket winner here. And you might know, too, if you've been paying attention. This is a fun card. This is a fun battle. As I said, it's the battle of the poison. Creeping Poison versus Snakebite. The one that poisons you versus the reason you do not want to get poisoned. Interesting. I think, again, the ceiling on Creeping Poison is so much higher. I know on the Carcosa bracket battle, there was the one that was like, if you have 3 or more sanity, lose a horror and lose an action and surge. Like if you have 3 or more horror on you or something like that, or 3 less sanity remaining. And it's a card that, like, I think went very far because of the fear that it does provide if things are going bad. I'm going to give this one to Creeping Poison. Snakebite's scary, but, like, Snakebite goes away, right? Like, it's eventually you're not going to have to deal with the snakes anymore. Creeping Poison, it lives for a while, it's there for a while, and you're going to keep seeing it. And if you are poisoned, it's the worst card in the encounter set. So I'm going to give this one to Creeping Poison. Not to say that I think Snakebite's an easy card. I think both of these are bad, but I think that, like with most things, the payoff is better than the enabler, and I think that the same is true here. Snakebite is the enabler, Creeping Poison is the payoff, so the payoff is worse. Okay. Ill Omen and Shadowed. Interesting. I think I'm going to go with Ill Omen for this. While they're actually quite similar, where they deal the horror to, like, one person, most likely, sometimes they deal 2 horror in terms of Shadowed. Ill Omen still places a Doom down. It can still affect multiple investigators. It's peril, so, like, you can easily make the wrong decision, and no one can help influence that with you. So, like, that's why I'm going to go with this one. But I think Ill Omen is going to walk away the winner here. And then we're going to carry this forward into the next match, where I already know who's going to win this one, because I'm pretty sure this is the card that I hate the most in Forgotten Age. On a blind run, my friend called Ill Omen 3 Omen for a while. That's pretty funny. That makes me happy. We have Between Worlds and Ancestral Fear. So I think Between Worlds, funnily enough, is more likely to make you lose the campaign than Ancestral Fear is. I think it is. Like, I think if we just take away the feelings from this, I think that Between Worlds has the chance to make you lose the campaign. One, because it's in the final scenario, right? Like, it has that advantage over Ancestral Fear, right? But Ancestral Fear, you see it a lot, and I hate drawing this card. Because no matter what, once you've made your decision, this MFer surges. If this MFer did not surge, I think this card would be quite manageable. But because this son of a bitch surges, even if you order protection it, there's another card waiting for you. And it might be another Ancestral Fear. And Ancestral Fear into Ancestral Fear is like a nightmare. So I'm going to give this one to Ancestral Fear. All right. We have 2, 10. We're down to like our last 15 matchups, folks. Sorry, I have to do this. We're going to Ancestral Fear. Cross out Between Worlds. I think Between Two Worlds, like I said, can cause you to lose more, but I think it actually has less of an impact on the campaign as a whole than Ancestral Fear does, which I think should be obvious for why. I've said it a few times. Okay, man, there was a period in my life when my stomach, like, never grumbled. And now, I'm hungry. It's grumbling. So I'm excited to eat. I'm having a great time. I love these bracket battle videos. Even if like they don't do as great on YouTube, if you are watching to this point, thank you so much. Consider liking the video. It's a good way to help me out. I like making the bracket battles, which I think is most important. We have Shadowed in a Tear in Time. What be Tear in Time up top? Lost in Time. That makes sense. I mean, I think Tear in Time's worse than Shadowed. What is Shadowed beat into God here? Shadowed? Yeah, honestly, Shadowed actually had a pretty easy matchup. I think Shadowed is scary, but I think Tear in Time is scarier. So we're going to give this one to a Tear in Time, and Shadowed's time is ended. And actually, a Tear in Time, if we check this out, this is why I do the losers bracket, right? Because Tear in Time has been having a tear of a time down here in the losers bracket, just pushing through everything, which I think is really cool. Which is why I do this. Why I spend the extra hour, and maybe even hour 15, doing the losers bracket too. It's interesting to me. Okay. Between Worlds and Lost in the Wilds. So Between Worlds is the one that sucks you... I was going to say sucks you off. That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to say it, Justin. And Lost in the Wilds is the Brain 3 test. If you fail, can move or explore, and also Rotting remains you. I think I'd rather... Oh, I don't even know, man. The cannot move is really tough. It's hard to know for this one for me personally. Excuse me. Like, this one's very context dependent to know. And these are always the hard ones to, like, choose a card. I think if I had to draw either of these, though, I think generally I'd rather draw Lost in the Wild. Sorry, I'd rather draw Between Worlds, which is crazy when I think about it. But I think that... Oh, excuse me. That was very... I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Just burped right out. And the mic's not over here. The mic's right here. So my apologies for that. You were up close with that one. I am so sorry. I think I'm going to go... I don't know. I don't feel great about this one. I'm just going with my gut. And as I said, my gut is... I don't know. Can I trust my gut? I don't know. I feel like I have to give this one to Lost in the Wilds, though. I don't think it matters too much because I think that these ones ultimately aren't going to... I don't even know. I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. And also, like, my opinion can change throughout this whole tier list, too. Or, sorry, this whole bracket. All right, Serpent's Call and Timeline Destabilization. Interesting. Interesting. So I really don't like Timeline Destabilization. I think that card is not a good time. Funnily enough, it lost to Captive Mind earlier, which is kind of crazy. I don't know what Past Justin was thinking. Okay, Captive Mind lost to Creeping Poison. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I think Serpent's Call, it can be so many things. It can be positive cards, it can be negative cards, but I think overall, the time with it is pretty neutral. It's fun to draw on counter cards, too. I kind of like it. I think it's kind of fun to draw on counter cards. So that's also kind of why I'm for it. I don't know. I don't trust myself with that card, I'll be honest with you. So you don't have to trust me either. Okay. We have Snakebite and Lost in Time. I mean, I think these cards are actually very similar to one another, but I think with Lost in Time, you could just like get rid of anything. Snakebite also poisons you, so we're going to give this one to Snakebite. Again, this is the enabler. Like, this is the common enabler. Not the most common, because the most common is actually action agenda flipped for getting poisoned. And it's the reason why a lot of people do end up packing medicine to come. I always wanted to ask you something about Bryn. As long as it's not about the mask, I was gonna say as long as he's not about the mask, I'll answer it. Because why he's wearing the mask is his own personal reasons. I'm not here to answer that. Yeah, he has his reasons, but they are not mine to talk about. All right, good job, Snakebite. All right, let's get through this one. When is Dream Eaters with Eric? The first episode of Dream Eaters with Eric is going to go live on June 24th. So literally actually a month from now, the month of recording this video. So in 1 month, Dream Eaters with Eric is going to go live. Okay, A Tear in Time and Lost in the Wilds. I want to see the path. Where did Lost in the Wilds lose? Lost in the Wilds. Lost in the Wilds lost to Lost in Time. A Tear in Time. These are very similar. So I think, like, in its nature, Lost in the Wilds is worse, right? Excuse me. Like, Lost in the Wilds just has to be worse, right? Because they're the same card, but you have less choice in Lost in the Wilds. And if you fail, there's also an additional problem on top of it. This one is just math. This one's an easy victory. This one's just the way. This one is actually served to me on a platter. So we're going to go with Lost in the Wilds. Because it is actually just strictly worse. Because you don't get choice of what happens when you fail. You also can deny Lost in the Wilds, so there's that too. But which scenarios are they present in? That changes it. That's a good point. Lost in the Wilds. I actually don't know that off the top of my head. Pokeballs in Boundary Beyond. Pokeballs in... I mean, it doesn't matter too much. I actually still would rather draw Tear in Time because I have choice. And I don't even think so. Tear in Time is in the last scenario? Cool. That doesn't change it for me. Because still, I would rather, if I'm looking at these two cards here, I'm looking at these two cards. I think I'd rather draw I'd rather draw Tear in Time. Fail by 2. Take a horror, lose an action. That's okay. Fail by 2 and Lost in the Wilds. Take 2 horror, can't move or explore. I have to take out some of that when I don't know off the top of my head where they all fit. Just looking at the two cards here. You bring up a good point, but unfortunately I don't think it moves the needle for me. After thinking about it for a few moments. If I had a list, it would make it easier, but honestly, I don't want to get too lost in the sauce, you know? I think we already have a lot of sauce we're lost in here, you know? I'm eating too much pasta sauce right now. Timeline Destabilization and Snakebite. I'm going to give this one to Snakebite. Again, it's just the enabler for the poison mechanic. Timeline Destabilization is a scary card, but not, I think, as scary as Snakebite. I fear Snakebite. I don't like Timeline Destabilization. Okay. We are almost done. We are in our top 4 here. Okay. The secret must be kept, and creeping poison. This is tough. I think the numbers on secret must be kept are obviously terrifying, right? It's obviously a terrifying card. Creeping of the poison dings ya and it surges. I think I'm gonna go with the secret must be kept. Because if you're not poisoned, like I'm talking about like the worst case, you're poisoned, you keep getting dinged by this card and it's really bad, right? But the secret must be kept is like usually always a problem. Even at 3, like 3, 1, and 1 is still a noticeable like encounter. Also, like the things that care about the tokens that care about failing. But like creeping poisoned, if everyone's not poisoned, this card doesn't exist. And obviously that's why Surge is on the card. But I think I'm gonna give this one to the secret must be kept. But I'm pretty proud of creeping poison for doing this. I think the card is really tough, and it might even like creep ahead in the losers bracket. We're gonna see what happens. Now that Creeping Shadow is gone, we need something to creep around. And it might be Creeping Poison, because it also creeps. They're both creeping, right? Alright, I think if you've been paying attention, you know what card's going to win this whole thing. We have Ill Omen and Ancestral Fear for the last part of the top 4 from the winner's bracket. And it's going to be Ancestral Fear. I think I've made up my mind. Usually how this goes is at this point I know the treachery that's going to win. And I know the treachery that's going to win. It's going to be our good friend, probably Ancestral Fear. It's the only card that throughout this entire time, every time it shows up, I'm like, oh, I hate drawing that card. I hate it. I hate drawing Ancestral Fear. It's a great encounter card, right? Like, I'm not saying I wish the card was softer. Like, everything I'm saying, take any of that out of it. Because I do not wish that the card was an easier card to play with. I think it's like perfectly good at what it does, but it hits hard and it's scary and it's strong. And that's why it's there. All right. We have Creeping Poisons and Lost in the Wilds. Let's look at Creeping Poison's history. It's been in a lot of cards. Can it... Okay, so, like, look at it, because, like, if we look at this, like, honestly, I think Lost in the Wilds and A Terran Time can actually be pretty similar here. Would it beat either of those cards? Right, like, and I think because they're so close, I think that I would take either of those cards over Creeping Poison generally. So I think Lost in the Wilds is going to win, but honestly, because like Metroid Man in chat is right, with the changes that the scenarios that they're present in does change it. So these two are kind of like Terran Time and Lost in the Wilds are kind of coming up here together. They're kind of sharing this path to victory here. So goodbye Creeping Poison, but I think overall you're going to lose to those. And then we have Ill Omen and Snakebite. I think this one's got to be Snakebite, right? What beats Snakebite? Creeping Poison. Interesting. And honestly, that actually is just because, like, it all changes so much because of the matchup, too, right? Like, I know you're like, but Justin, you're just, like, choosing the scariest card. How can it actually change? That's why we do the head-to-head stuff, because it makes the conversations more interesting. Because I do think that Snakebite is, compared to that and Creeping Poison, I'd rather draw, like, Snakebite. Because, again, the payoff is worse than the enabler. But, like, assuming I'm poisoned, right? Like, assuming I'm poisoned as well. But, like, as soon as you then, like, put Snakebite or Creeping Poison against other cards, like, maybe Creeping Poison isn't as scary. It's very interesting. It's very interesting how my brain works. Does it work well? I don't know. But I'm here having a good time, and that's really all that matters, right? All right. We have... for Lost in the Wilds and A Tear in Time against Snakebite. Again, I think Snakebite's got this. I think Snakebite's going to walk up and go into the final part of our losers bracket here. Okay. And then we have the top part of our final match of our winners bracket before we go into the final two here, which is The Secret Must Be Kept and Ancestral Fear. Honestly, Secret Must Be Kept is a terrifying card, but I've made up my mind. Ancestral Fear is going to win the whole tournament. It's just going to be the way that it is. It's a scary freaking card, and there's nothing that can change that for me. And then we have the final two from our winners bracket, for our losers bracket here, which is The Secret Must Be Kept and Snakebite. And I think this is strange. Like, maybe Snakebite should have beat Creeping Poison in retrospect, but I still stand by my decision when I made that. Snakebite, I think, is worse than The Secret Must Be Kept, even though it's just the way the double elimination goes, right? So then, to close this out, and I'm going to show the whole bracket once this is all done. Worry you not. We have our final match here, which I'm pretty sure is Ancestral Fear against Snakebite. And I'm going to go with my boy, Ancestral Fear. But honestly, in looking at this matchup, I think Snakebite is pretty damn close to it. Even though I made up my mind a while ago, I do think that Snakebite actually can kind of give Ancestral Fear a little bit of a run for its money. And I mean, like, honestly, I think, like, it's Snakebite deserves to be the second scariest, I think. So, looking at our bracket, can I zoom in? I can. So, scariest card from Forgotten Age is Ancestral Fear. Snakebite's number 2. Secrets Must Be Kept is number 3. And then, like, number 4 is the Lost in the Wilds, A Tear in Time combo. Because it is true, they are very, very close. And while I'm not using that in my my interpretation of it too much, I concede that that is a very relevant point. So we're doing that. But with that, congratulations, Ancestral Fear. You did it! You're the winner and the scariest card for me personally from the Forgotten Age. Let me know in the comments what your scariest treachery is in the Forgotten Age. I'd love to hear it. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. And as always, GG's.